you're doing it wrong. That's right, I said it. You're not painting miniatures correctly. I know. You painted 1,000 GW, Warhammer figures, you name it, any of your other tabletop slop that's being shelled out these days, but let's be honest. Who can really afford that stuff? It's really expensive. I suggest painting 172 scale figures. There's lots of reasons that people like to do them. They're like 1/10 the cost. Like, you can get an entire army for how much one box of GW stuff costs. It's kind of ridiculous. And who has money to throw around these days? I know I certainly don't. So, 1/72 scale. Here we have some nice little French soldiers. They're Airfix variety. I had tried lots of different figures, but I think that these are good ones to start with. You want to find a good primer, and that's like one of the hardest things to find these days. You really only have two options. Personally, I think that gesso spray, which comes in only white, it's like a prep for like doing normal acrylic painting. That stuff works the best in my opinion, especially if you're doing Napoleonic era type figures that have lots of contrasting colors. That white base works very well. Now, if you're speed painting, you could use a colored base, like these figures here. There's some chasseurs, or I'm probably butchering that, but little French guys here. I painted them in blue spray paint. I used a unspeakable brand for the base coat. I used a really light coat. Now the plastic on these 172 scale figures is really soft. It's like it doesn't want, like nothing wants to stick to it. It's like horrible. And I've tried all kinds of things, but really you only have those two options. Gesso spray being the best, and secondarily, if time is a factor, you can use a color. Like for example, when I do horses, typically I'll spray them in brown. But anyways, once you get your base coat, your light coat of base coat, mind you, don't drown them. You want us to kind of work from light to dark. And one of the other problems that I notice a lot that people do wrong is when you're jumping down to 1/72 scale from the larger scales, the detail consistency changes. So like, you need to look at your army as how it looks like all together, and how coordinated it all is with color and such, and less on the little nitty gritty details. A lot of people paint like comic books. They spend hours and hours and hours trying to get every little detail and every little section, staying within the lines, and at the end of it, you kind of end up with kind of a cartoony figure, and you'll go crazy after painting about 1,000 of them. So my suggestion is go up a brush size and paint a little dirty. Purposely try to kind of go over the edges a little bit. Blend your colors together and kind of step back and look at it, and at your figures after you've based them and such, and think, how can I make this quick but yet cohesive, I guess. So here I'm painting the black, and the black is always a tricky color. I actually like to take some Games Workshop black, and I'll thin it out quite a bit. But getting the proper consistency is tricky. And like I said, with these figures, you want to go pretty heavy, especially on the legs or the bendy parts, because think of it as you're kind of building a cocoon around the figure, and after it hardens, it will be rather durable for what it is. I also recommend painting them on the bases. I don't flock my figures because I paint mostly for tabletop gaming purposes or for demonstration purposes. And I like to be able to see right away what faction that unit is representing and such. And it's a lot less messy too, because no matter how hard you try to keep your flock on your bases, it seems to always get everywhere. And you know, who wants to be cleaning up flock at 2 o'clock in the morning? So, anyways, think of it as like you want an army that looks good, but you want it to be durable. So I paint for durability. You know, I do a thin base coat. I go over, hit all the different elements. For example, here I'm doing the brown. And I'm basically taking the different color options and working from basically the top to the bottom. So think of it as you paint each unit, you can cover up mistakes from previous sections, if you get what I'm saying. So like if you smudge a little paint here, like on the backpack on this one here, later I can go over with a different color and kind of clean it up a little bit. After you've gone through each of your colors and you've got all your sections painted out, I like to go over them with an ink. You know, it's kind of like I use Games Workshop Newell oil, but originally, back in the day, before such things existed, I actually stumbled upon something similar, whereas I dropped the figure into my paint wash bucket, or my paintbrush cleaning bucket, and didn't think about it too much, and I pulled it out, and I hadn't changed the water in quite some time, and I let the figure sit out for a while, and when I came back and looked at it, I noticed that it actually looked pretty cool, and it'd fill in quite a bit of the little details. And that's another thing I don't see a lot of other people use, is inks correctly. They either rely too heavily on them or not enough. Washes, I think, are kind of a waste of time. But as you can see here, I just picked out the details and did the basic areas, and then I went over it with the ink. And you want like total coverage, you want to go pretty heavy, and you want to make sure that you give it plenty of time to dry. If you want to make them even look more rustic and more like detailed, you can do multiple coats. Alternatively, too, you could also take a wet brush after they've dried and go over them and kind of remove the top layer. I'll do that on, like, if I'm trying to get more of a brighter look. I don't do dry brushing. I think dry brushing is another kind of mistake, especially at this scale. I think people rely on it too heavily. Like, I see a lot of people, they base in dark colors like black and such, and then they dry brush with white, and then they go over with their contrast colors and such, and then they ink it, and then they, maybe they'll varnish it or whatever. And what you end up is you end up with like really clumpy, non-detailed figures, and that's it might look okay as a whole when you have the army together, but I think it takes away some of the, lifelikeness to it. You can have lifelike figures and still have them be durable for gaming use. And that's, what I'm always shooting for, is what's going to be durable and stand the test of time. Looks like these guys are turning out pretty good. The backpacks always come out real nice with the wash and the ink. But after you get the figures all inked up and you let them dry thoroughly, then really the only step left to do is to base them. And I'll go in there with a little green and base them. Here's the captain. He was kind of a little trickier. Cavalry, I've had different opinions on it. Some people will paint them on the sprues. I don't think you should ever paint on sprues, by the way. That's another mistake I think people make. It's a waste of time, and because by the time you clip them out, if you're painting them, you gotta go back and touch them up, and you're just gonna get paint on your hands. And just take them take them off, get yourself a board cutter and cut some strips out and glue your figures with some Elmer's glue. It makes it easy to base them, makes it easy to paint them. You want to kind of get your muscle memory into check when you're painting, and like when you're going down the line, the less you have to move, the more you can kind of lock a motion in. This helps when doing like fine detail work like striping and such. But here we are inking this guy up. He's turning out pretty good. Another thing is with the horses, the coloring on the horses. Most Napoleonic era horses, the higher the rank, the darker the horse. So like a captain or a cuirassier or such would probably be on like a black horse, and a scout would be on like a gray or something. But you can play with different options really when you're painting horses and see what works. But even just spray painting them brown and going over them with a brown ink wash, looks pretty good. So here we have the regiment all painted up. The flag turned out pretty good. But a lot of times when you're doing these, it's like less is more. Don't overdo it. Don't spend too much time. Like, precision comes with practice. So the more you paint, the better it gets. And, organizing, deciding, really thinking out what path you're going to take when painting is just as important as like the finished product, because that's really what you're conveying is does this represent something. Some drummers here. Drummers are always pretty tricky too. 1/72 is not easy, but the cost compared to the larger scales and the different time periods, and they even make fantasy stuff. It's such a better buy, and it's so much more fulfilling in my personal experience, in my career of painting. It's just, because really, what's it about? I love big armies. You love big armies. If you're doing it, it's all about the massive representations of conflict, and it just looks so much better when you have cohesively painted figures, and there's a little grit to them. Warfare was not pretty. It was gritty. And when you're doing dioramas and you're doing wargaming, that's part of what really brings you into the action and lets the feel of the game come through. And so I guess what I'm saying is, don't overpaint. Don't try to make award-winning figures on every single one of your figures, because you're just going to get frustrated and you're not going to get anything done. Now, I paint thousands of figures, and I've been doing it a long time, but I think anybody really can paint at a decent level with just a little bit of practice and focus. But yeah, this is kind of wanting to show kind of what the basing coats look like, and that cannon in the background. I always like to do kind of like a test run, like a test paint before I do a regiment or a unit, and kind of get the color codes figured out and see what works and what doesn't, because every regiment you do, or every grouping of units that you're painting, some approaches work better than others, and it's good to kind of try a few little different things before you do the whole regiment and get stuck halfway through it and find, oh crap, this isn't working, because the posing really makes a big difference too. That cannon turned out pretty nice. And there's the captain again, all finished up and dry. I think I was real happy with this guy. when you're painting the white, when you're painting the striping and such, try to hold your brush at like a negative canter, or basically have the brush hold the tip towards yourself and kind of pull it away, and that'll give you some of those crisp lines and such, and then you can go in with the ink afterwards, and like I said, that'll clean up. You know, it truly is like liquid talent, if you will. You know, because I mean, I don't claim to be the best painter in the world, but I can paint a lot of figures, and I think they look pretty good when they're set up. And my ultimate goal of all this is to paint up all the major factions from the Napoleonic era, and then I kind of want to do some live streaming of gameplay where maybe some of the viewers, could take command of some of the regiments. I'm going to try to do it at 1-to-1 scale, so it might be interesting if this ever becomes somewhat popular. I'm not really looking to get like a gabillion subscribers. I'm just looking for like people would like to enjoy this hobby with me. Here's the army so far, the French Grand Armée. I've got probably about 1/3 of it done. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the year, and we'll see. But I got the early French done, the mid-French. Got some of the cavalry done. Got, But all in all, it's a good hobby. You should try it out. And please like and subscribe and all that jazz. And I'll see you next week. Laters.